Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept, from the role-playing world and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is the God Learners from RuneQuest Garantha. Now before I begin, it's worth mentioning that information on this subject has been scattered across multiple editions of RuneQuest, some of which that are no longer considered canon, so I've mostly taken it from RuneQuest Role-Playing in Garantha, the Garanthan Sourcebook, the Guide to Garantha, and Arcane Lore and the Middle Sea Empire from the Stafford Library, as well as Mongoose Publishing's RuneQuest material, The Abiding Book, and Magic of Garantha. I would also like to thank the various artists and companies that have kindly let me use their art in this video, such as Dan Barker and Katrin Dirham, and of course Chaosium, as well as Mongoose Publishing, and also Johnstown Compendium Community Ambassador Nick Brook, who kindly sanity and lore checked this for me, as well as letting me use the wonderful art from his book, A History of Malkianism. I've put a link to their work in the notes section below. Hailing from the island of Jurastella in the Second Age, the God Learners created and ruled the Middle Sea Empire. They worshipped the invisible god, essentially known as Malkianism after its founder, Malkian. He is a deity that exists, but that does not interfere or act in mortal affairs. It's believed that the invisible god created everything. From his thoughts sprang the runes that shaped the world and fueled a mandate of self-reliance among the sorcerers of the Middle Sea Empire. They believed that he was not a god, but the one true god. Malkioni are, for all purposes, a unique type of Gloranthan atheist. That being that they don't deny gods exist, but that those that worship them are marked as a barbarian that barters with spirits for magic. The God Learners instead practice sorcery, which allowed them to affect the material world as an individual without this reliance. Their scripture was known as the Abiding Book, a tome considered to be the holiest text of the Malkioni and said to contain the thoughts of the invisible god. It's believed it was written by the will of Malkion that wrote the book while being witnessed. A text that seemed to have no beginning nor end, it is similar in structure to that of a spider's web and was revealed in 646 ST in Jurastella during the Imperial Age, being kept at the holy mountain of Jurastella. The book contains 216 chapters covering a wide range of diverse topics such as moral law and rituals, and due to the style it was written, it could be interpreted in many different ways. Through this work they believed that they answered to no one, as only misguided mortals emulated the deeds of false gods, and thus the plundering of the god plane could not be a crime when the invisible god himself decried all said false gods. Within a year of the Abiding Book being revealed, this new Malkioni understanding had won over the Jurastelli and moved quickly to other Malkioni strongholds. The earliest known God Learners were known as the Seven Explorers and were a group of wizards and priests from Randinthanos who moved to crush an elf-led rebellion in Umathella in 654 ST using new magic that they had created after studying the Abiding Book. The heirs of these wizards became known as the God Learners, and in 776 ST had developed strange magical methods that they used to look at the world, known as the RuneQuest Sight. This allowed them to view Garantha as a series of patterns, reflections and relationships that could be organised and attributed to the runes, though it's believed that this blinded them to the reality of a created world and the inherent compassion contained within. The philosophy of the God Learners soon came to dominate Jurastelli Malkianism, and in 680 ST, a younger generation looked for a new power to help them return to rightness, that of them being seated on the throne of Shashnella, something they achieved by 734 ST. This led to a political movement called the Free Men of the Sea, who had, despite a Wertagi monopoly, excelled in boat building and sailing, founding the cult of Diros, and that was when the trouble with the Wertagi started. They wished their monopoly to remain intact and unleashed destruction and curses upon the Jurastelli, who fought back using their newly acquired war god, Wakaza. The Wertagi brought their entire fleet to bear and were met by the God Learners in the Battle of Tanian's victory in 718 ST. The God Learners summoned a near impossible water god called Tanian, known as the god who burns water, who decimated the Wertagi fleet, allowing the humans to explore the seas unhindered for the first time in history. When God Learners expanded into Rallios, they seized secret maps of the hero plane from the shadowy cult of Arcat when they pillaged Arcati temples. They opened schools of magic for those with the ability or money to learn sorcery, and they set about mapping and hero questing the god plane again and again, which required even more skillful sorcerers to achieve their ends. Doing so allowed them to apply a degree of coherency around the confusing cosmologies of Garantha. The God-learners wielded mighty sorcery over all of the other cultures of Glorantha, looking down their noses at the belief of the lowly barbarians. However, they were soon to be guilty of an act of hubris so colossal that it wiped out their civilization, a divine violation that would condemn them to history, the goddess switch. There were two lesser grain goddesses, Inaka and Einhorn, from both Wenelia and Slantos respectively, that the God-learners altered the mythology of through repeated hero questing, the murder of other minor deities, and deception of these goddesses themselves, creating variant legends in order to compensate for this alteration, and over time, the two cultures began worshipping the new goddesses just as they had worshipped their original goddesses. The God-learners had, for want of a better term, essentially hacked reality, using their sorcerous prowess, and as such mortal actions had changed the God plane, and in doing so in such a way, denied themselves the secret experiences required to truly understand this power. As the years passed, their switch started becoming corrupted. The sorcerer lords of Pythos University, those who had watched over the switch, started noticing that crops were beginning to fail in the two affected regions. Marriages that were sworn on the goddesses were failing after around a year, and fruit began killing those that consumed it in Wenelia. At this stage, the God-learners were unaware that they brought downfall upon their own empire and went into a form of damage control, surrounding the areas with soldiers commanded by God-learners who would kill anybody carrying news to other areas of the cultures they had doomed to die, blocking anybody from leaving or entering these areas. Reality itself was rejecting the God-learners' warped sorcerous act. Not content, or maybe not believing that they'd done any harm to Glorantha, the God-learners violated the natural order for a second time by birthing a new deity, Zistor, the machine god. Guilty of not only stealing cultural myths, they were also practiced on obtaining magical secrets from others to use for their own purposes. As such, they stole magic from the Mostali and used it to create Zistor. The God-learners believed that the mortal plane, the spirit plane and the god planes were not everything, and rejected the idea of the hero plane as being a bastardization of the god and spirit planes. Using stolen Mostali magic, they created magical arts rooted in machinery, and it was believed that these drew magic from a true fourth plane, that of which they termed magical science. It was argued that they had developed this theory as another God-learner shortcut to power, and Zistor was deemed a false god. However, the God-learners would postulate that if Zistor behaved like a god and provided powers like a god, then criticism was by its nature flawed. Zistorites would use their arts to create magical weapons and armour for the God-learners' use, and are even said to have created biotechnological enhancements that they would implant in their bodies. The sprawling metropolis known as Zistorwell was created in a region called God Forgot, and it powered the efforts of the God-learners. Thought by some as a technological wonder and by others as an abomination against the world, and become known as the Machine City, a gigantic automaton of iron, bronze and flesh powered by magic. Unknown to most was the fact that Zistor itself was within the Machine City as a series of interlinked machinery that was bound by copper and bronze cables and pumped lightning and magic. The machines themselves were powered by steam, clockwork and sorcery, built from stolen Mostali lore and God-learner magic. The God-learners seemed unstoppable. So you may be asking yourself at this point, what happened to them? Well, though their initial sorcerous experiments were somewhat tentative, the experiments leading up to their demise were reckless and brutal. Though it's slightly uncertain, it's believed that the invisible god became outraged at the blasphemies committed in his name, and he unleashed his fury upon the Durastelli. Demons that they had imprisoned were freed, and their kingdoms were struck with storms, hurricanes, earthquakes and floods. Their towers were felled and the oceans swallowed their fleets as Slotos was sunk beneath the waves, forever becoming a warning to those that seek to meddle with reality. As a parting shot, Zaber of Britos, the grand sorcerer of the God-learners, cast a great curse that closed the oceans off to all ships. The Wertagi were even affected by this grand magical gesture, and it remained this way for over 500 years until Dormal the Sailor drove the curse back. It's not known if any God-learners survived, though the king of the Brews, Ralzakark of Doristor, is rumoured to have a living God-learner slaves that he abuses daily as punishment for the hubris that the sorcerers of the Middlesea Empire enacted upon Glorantha. Perhaps the most important legacy of the God-learners is that Gloranthans today are leery of anyone who seems tempted to abuse the powers of the gods, especially if they appear to have the hated RuneQuest sight of the God-learners. People who act as if they have objectively analysed the world, see it only as patterns of numbers and rules, and then look for exploits that break them, are anathema to any sensible society. Arkat's basic rule was no questing without respect and humility, and the God-learners ignored this, and this led to their doom. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.